Alrighty, my name is Caron Trumbo. I am the VP of Operations here at Virginia Bio, and we are so excited to have you all join us today for our luncheon with Focused Ultrasound. I want to start off with a few housekeeping. Everyone is entering this on mute. Please stay on mute. If you have a question, you can type it into the chat box or the raise your hand, and I will happily unmute you so you can ask it yourself. But out of respect for others, try to keep yourself on mute rest of the time so we don't get any background noise. Today's luncheon would not be possible without our wonderful sponsors, Virginia Beach Bio, We Work for Health, Activation Capital, VCU Innovation Gateway, and the Virginia Catalyst. We are so thankful for their continued support, and we hope that hopefully by next session in the fall, we can maybe provide box lunches for people again. So thanks so much for joining today. I'm going to allow Jessica to give us her screen while I tell you a little bit about her. Jessica Foley is the Chief Scientific Officer for the Focused Ultrasound Foundation. Their mission is to accelerate the development and adoption of focused ultrasound, a breakthrough non-invasive therapeutic medical technology. In her position, she guides strategy development and implementation of scientific and research programs for the foundation. She leads alliance building efforts with external stakeholders, including governmental, policymakers, regulatory agencies, and disease-specific foundations, whose interests are complementary to those of the foundation. She is a great representative and an advocate for the foundation and the focused ultrasound community. Prior to joining the foundation, she spent several years in the medical device industry and was a 2011 to 2012 AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellow at the National Science Foundation. She holds a BSc in Biomedical Engineering from Duke University and a PhD in Bioengineering from the University of Washington. She does have a presentation for us today, so when she is finished, we will have a chance for questions. Again, please put them in the chat or the Q&A box, and raise your hand if you'd like to ask it yourself. I'm happy to unmute you for that. So without any further ado, I'm going to let Jessica get started.
Thank you, Caron, and thank you for this invitation. It's really a delight to be able to speak with you and the Virginia Bio community today. So I'd like to start by having you imagine a patient with a malignant brain tumor treated with sound instead of, or in addition to, more traditional treatments like surgery, radiation therapy, chemotherapy. And imagine that this new treatment is non-invasive with fewer side effects, less toxicity, yet it's able to extend a patient's life potentially, enhance their quality of life. So it may sound far-fetched and maybe even like science fiction, but it's not. The potential is very real today with focused ultrasound. So focused ultrasound is an early stage, revolutionary, non-invasive therapeutic technology. And it really has the potential to be an alternative or a complement to surgery, radiation, drug delivery, and immunotherapy treatments. And it has a potential to transform treatment, particularly because it's non-invasive. This is mostly an outpatient procedure. There's no incisions, meaning less pain, meaning less need for post-procedure pain medications like opioids, leading to decreased complications as well, like infection, hemorrhage, tissue damage, and overall patients experience a more rapid recovery. And this all can potentially improve outcomes and lower costs of healthcare. So this slide shows a gentleman with essential tremor. This is an architect. You can see how difficult it is for him to move these jelly beans from one container to another. So this was a very disabling condition for him. And you can see how difficult it is for him to draw, as evidenced by these line and circle drawings here. Then you can see this is a very small region in the brain, in the deep part of the brain, the thalamus, and that region is where the nerve cells are firing uncontrollably, causing the tremor. And that's where the neurosurgeon will target the focused ultrasound. This is representative of 1,000 different beams of focused ultrasound as they converge at that small spot deep in the brain. And during this procedure, the patient is inside of an MRI. but they're awake with no anesthesia, no incisions, burr holes. So all of that means no infection and less chance for different complications. And then you can see the imaging immediately following the treatment. This is this small region evidenced by the arrow, and that's the only region, again, that was needed to be treated in this case. So just that small tissue damage was able to get rid of the patient's tremor. You can see immediately following his treatment how easily now he can draw. And a couple weeks following the treatment, you can see how easily he can move these jelly beans from one container to another. So this is really evidence of how powerful and transformative that focused ultrasound can be for a patient such as this man here. And we think that this is, great to show something as difficult to treat as the brain. And if you can treat in the brain and you can have such a transformative impact, imagine what you can do, throughout the body. Such as something like pancreatic cancer, again, a condition that has a huge unmet clinical need. So you can see here, this patient has a very large tumor in their pancreas. As it's treated with focused ultrasound, you can see how it is this dark region here. That's evidence that the tissue has died. And then over time, that tissue is just resorbed and filtered out of the body. And so you can see just how focused ultrasound ablation alone was able to reduce the size of this patient's tumor. What was interesting in this trial that took place in Italy was that in a handful of patients, they also saw impacts on the metastatic tumor, not just the primary tumor. And the metastatic tumor was actually decreasing in size. This is known as the abscopal effect and is caused by some sort of immune response to the treatment. This is obviously was a phenomenon that wasn't expected, but it was incredibly exciting because it was clinical evidence suggesting that focused ultrasound on its own could actually perhaps induce an immune response. And I'll come back to that because there's a huge field of research now studying this effect. So in general, how does focused ultrasound work? Well, it works very similarly to the way a magnifying glass would focus beams of sunlight and burn a hole in a leaf. Except in this case, you are using a focused ultrasound transducer to focus many different beams of sound deep in the body, in this case on a breast tumor. And what's really significant here and very unique about this technology compared to others is that you're only getting an impact right at that point of convergence of all of the beams. Only there are you getting the profound tissue effect. Everywhere else that the beams travel, whether it's the skull, the brain, tissue, fat, muscle, none of that will be impacted by the ultrasound energy. It's only at that point where the beams converge. The effect is very precise. So you can see there's a sharp demarcation between treated and untreated tissue. Really only about 1/10 of a millimeter separates those two. And what's been really great about that is particularly in tissues such as the brain, where there's very sensitive structures nearby, you can have a very precise treatment. There are many different effects that you can get at the focal point where the beams converge. I mentioned the tissue ablation, which is the most commonly used mechanism, but there are also mechanisms like drug delivery. I mentioned immunomodulation, neuromodulation. So there are now more than 20 different mechanisms of action that are being explored. And those variety of effects in the tissue really allow you to treat a variety of different disorders. So I'll mention just a few of these mechanisms. So the thermal ablation I mentioned is the one that's really most commonly used. You can also use mechanical energy from ultrasound to cause disruption of tissue cells as well and kill the tissue in a mechanically based way. In terms of drug delivery, there are many different ways in which focused ultrasound can aid in drug delivery and essentially allow you to deliver high concentrations of drugs just precisely where they're needed in the body, lowering the systemic impact of the drugs and lowering that systemic toxicity. So in this case, we look at something that's commonly used with ultrasound, which is a microbubble. You can see how this is much smaller than a red blood cell. And in this case, you can actually load microbubbles with different drugs or genes or growth factors and you can inject these microbubbles systemically in the body. They'll go throughout the body, but the drug is bound up in the microbubble, so it doesn't have any impact in the tissue as it's flowing through the body. So you can see this is just showing how it could be distributed else, all throughout the body. Now, say you have a liver tumor, you can apply the ultrasound directly to the tumor, and at that point, the ultrasound will then disrupt those microbubbles and cause the release of drugs only at the site of the tumor. So this is now a more localized form of delivery versus systemic delivery. And so as you can imagine, there's a lot of different applications of this use of the technology. Another exciting area that is in many different clinical trials right now is using ultrasound for opening the blood-brain barrier. So the blood-brain barrier is there to protect the brain from toxins and negative things that you don't want to get into the brain, but it also unfortunately can limit therapeutics from getting into the brain that could be useful for treating tumors or for treating neurodegenerative diseases, for example. So focused ultrasound, again, applied to very small regions in the brain, or even scanned and applied throughout the brain, could actually temporarily open the blood-brain barrier. And you can see, as evidenced by this bright region here, that's the region in this patient where the blood-brain barrier was opened. So how does this actually happen? So again, we come back to those microbubbles that we mentioned. And this animation is just showing these microbubbles oscillating within the ultrasound field. They're oscillating inside the blood vessel, and as they do, they put pressure on the wall of the blood vessel on the endothelium. And as they do that, they actually cause these small tight junctions to open and allow the release of drugs or therapeutics into the brain. This is a phenomenon that is temporary. So within a number of hours, the blood-brain barrier will seal back up, and then it's going to be protecting from anything else that could get into the brain. And I'll mention a little bit later about some of the trials with using this technique. And then the final area, the final kind of mechanism of action I'll mention is using ultrasound for inducing that immune response, as I kind of alluded to at the beginning of the talk. So tumors have a good way of camouflaging themselves from the immune system, and focused ultrasound can actually destroy that camouflage. It can be applied to the tumor, disrupt the tumor cells, and expose antigens and release proteins that allow the immune system to recognize and then attack the tumors. And this can be used in combination with immunotherapeutics to either enhance the effectiveness of the immunotherapeutics or also to perhaps aid in their delivery into the tumor. So all of these different mechanisms of action, as I mentioned, allow or enable the treatment of a wide variety of clinical disorders. So there are now over 130 different applications of focused ultrasound that are in various stages of development. What's important to note on this chart here is really the kind of diversity of applications that are clinical applications that are out there, as well as what stage of development they are in. So there are many that are still very early stage, still in the preclinical or just kind of pilot trial phase. There are several that are approved by the FDA. So you can see the ones in red. So we have essential tremor, Parkinson's tremor, bone metastases, osteoid osteoma, prostate disease, as well as uterine fibroids. But only a few of these are approved by insurance. And mostly Medicare coverage, but not even a lot of private insurer coverage. So there's a lot of challenges in the reimbursement space, but essential tremor, Parkinson's tremor, and bone metastases do have fairly good coverage from Medicare. And there are a lot more indications that are approved outside of the US and in clinical trials here. So we expect that over the next several years, we'll see a lot more FDA approvals. So what I just wanted to touch on was that, I mentioned that this ultrasound for thermal ablation is really the main application right now of the technology. And so these FDA approvals have been using that mechanism of action of focused ultrasound. But as we look to the future, we really see that a huge potential of focused ultrasound is to use it in combination with drugs. So with chemotherapies, with immunotherapies, we really see it as another tool in the physician's armamentarium for treating things like cancer or for treating neurodegenerative diseases. And so what we're looking at now is a lot of clinical trials that are starting where they're not just then looking at the impact of ultrasound, but how it's actually improving the delivery and the effectiveness of these drugs. So this is just a snapshot of many clinical trials that are ongoing right now, using various different drugs and delivering them through the blood-brain barrier. So I showed you a couple of slides about how ultrasound can temporarily open the blood-brain barrier. So there have been several trials just investigating the safety of that technique, and now more trials are actually looking at the delivery of drugs. In this case, mostly chemotherapies, a couple that are also in the immunotherapy realm. But again, we expect a lot more of these kind of trials to occur in the future. And in the realm of immunotherapy, there is a trial for the, as I mentioned on the previous slide, for the BBB opening, delivering a checkpoint inhibitor. There are also a couple of trials at University of Virginia that are using ultrasound for its ability to stimulate the immune response. And they're pairing the ultrasound with checkpoint inhibitors to see if the ultrasound enables a more pronounced and robust immune response than just the drug alone. So these are all really exciting for us. And I'll mention later on as well that I think what the technology is really at the stage now where we need partners. We need to partner with pharmaceutical companies, biotech companies, because as we really think there's a lot of promise for focused ultrasound in combination with drugs, we really want to make sure that as we're moving forward, we're working in partnership with these other folks who are experts in that area. So, even with all of these different clinical applications and all of this excitement, still every new idea, every new focused ultrasound clinical application, new device is really going to require kind of go through a long and winding road to get from new idea to patient adoption, to physician adoption, to really widespread patient access. And that process can often be complicated and inefficient. Many of you obviously are familiar with it. The biomedical innovation ecosystem is very complex. And so there are many different players and they all have their own kind of agendas and timelines. In the case of focused ultrasound, there are also many different barriers along the way, along that long and winding road. I won't mention all of these, but I already mentioned insurance reimbursement being a big one, as well as just really educating and raising awareness amongst physicians of this new technology and helping to build physician champions that can help really shepherd this through to the point where it can be clinically adopted and become standard of care. So several years ago, we kind of looked about and thought, well, how can we really overcome all of these different impediments to this really potentially groundbreaking technology that could benefit so many patients, and didn't see a specific model to follow. And that was the impetus to create the Focused Ultrasound Foundation. So the foundation was created in 2006, based in Charlottesville, and we're a really unique medical research, education, and advocacy organization where we're focused on not just one disease, but this technology that has the potential to treat so many different diseases. And we really are the catalyst to accelerate the development and widespread clinical adoption of focused ultrasound. So, we're doing a lot to really influence the direction of this field. It's still an early stage in developing field. So we're identifying critical unmet clinical needs and setting research priorities as to what are the clinical applications that we should fund in this area, the different biomechanisms that have a lot of potential, as I mentioned, blood-brain barrier opening and immunomodulation, and also importantly, trying to change the culture of the field. So creating one that's more patient-centric, always having the patient at the center of our mission, and fostering a sense of urgency amongst all of the different stakeholders in this ecosystem, and also building collaboration, because that's so important to driving innovation. So I think fostering collaboration is one of the most important things that we do. This starts with just breaking down the silos of secrecy, getting people talking to each other. This could be government, academia, industry, because obviously we want them to be sharing their experience and their information and ideas, and allow them to coordinate activities rather than all working on similar things. So we want to avoid the duplication of effort. Overall, collaboration will be stimulating innovation, which allows us to more rapidly achieve the knowledge and results that we need to really accelerate the development and adoption of focused ultrasound to become a standard of care. We're also working to create new knowledge. So we're organizing, conducting, and funding research. We've picked several areas that are an emphasis to us, in large part because of the unmet need in some of these areas. So in the brain, we have neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, where we really have a lot of effort, as well as epilepsy, OCD, depression, cancer and cancer immunotherapy, specifically glioblastoma, pancreatic cancer, breast cancer. We also have a dedicated pediatrics program and a veterinary program, recognizing that focused ultrasound can be used for treating humans as well as animals, and that we can learn in both of those situations, we can learn how to better treat the other. So there's a lot of synergy there. And we've become the largest non-governmental funding source for focused ultrasound research. As I mentioned, collaboration, well, it's important to bring people together. Obviously, that's not as easy to do over the last year, but we still are working really hard to do the best we can in that regard. It starts with our biennial symposium that we have every 2 years in the Washington, D.C. area. This last year, we held it in this past November, and this was a fully virtual event, which actually was fantastic and allowed us to bring many more people into the symposium than in the past. We had over 1,500 people register and attend the symposium. We also have a lot of smaller invitation-only workshops, and these may be in specific clinical areas or in areas of, again, like hot topics like immunotherapy, for instance. And we are going to have some more of those this year again as well virtually. And then we try to collaborate and sponsor other meetings where focused ultrasound is going to be featured. We think it's incredibly important to cultivate the next generation of researchers in this field. So we have a scholars program, which includes fellowships. We have fellows that will come and actually work at the foundation for a year or two at a time, as well as work at research institutions like UVA. We fund internship programs around the world, as well as having interns come and work at the foundation. So we think this is a really important part of our mission. We do a lot to really raise awareness of focused ultrasound, as I mentioned. So we do that with our website. I encourage you all to visit the website at fusfoundation.org. We have many webinars, just as Virginia Bio is doing here. We have webinars about interesting things happening in focused ultrasound. We have a newsletter that's put out every 2 weeks. And so again, we encourage you to sign up for that, as well as active social media channels. We also have a Center of Excellence program. So we've identified that there are several sites throughout the world where they're really becoming a showcase for the technology, both in the preclinical and clinical realm. They're really pushing the envelope of what focused ultrasound can do. And so we give those sites sort of our stamp of approval and raise awareness of how fantastic these sites are, and use them as sort of models for other sites that are newer in the field. So we now have 10 centers of excellence, and our newest one is Children's National Hospital. And this was exciting because it also is our first pediatric center of excellence. So, as I mentioned, we do a lot to increase awareness. We want to talk to as many different groups as we can, connect with as many people one-on-one or in larger events. So obviously this is an example of an awareness event as well, because unfortunately still too many people do not know about focused ultrasound, and so we want to change that. We have a great communications team who's doing a lot to get all the exciting news about focused ultrasound and the foundation taken up by all the great media publications, as you see here. And probably our most effective awareness tool to date has been courtesy of John Grisham, who is on the foundation's board of directors. And several years ago, he wanted to do something bigger to impact the field, and realized, well, he can write a really great story. So he wrote this small book called The Tumor, and this is a free download on Amazon, Google Play, all the different ways of getting your online books, and now has had over 1 million readers and has just really been tremendous in terms of raising awareness of focused ultrasound as well as the foundation. And so that has been a huge tool for us. We also think it's incredibly important to be a good steward of the generous donors that we've had at the foundation. And so we work to build partnerships with other organizations. So particularly in terms of projects that we want to fund, finding co-funding for those projects, and other ways of really just building better connections with like-minded organizations, because that's going to allow us to go further together rather than alone. So this is just an example of a lot of the partnerships that we've built. And then it's also been incredibly important for us to help grow and help our companies in the field become successful as well. So there are now over 50 companies in focused ultrasound space. And so we realized that facilitating their commercialization of their products is important, but ultimately that is incredibly important because it's going to lead to more widespread patient access for focused ultrasound. So there's many different ways in which we work with the companies, but I highlighted some of our partner organizations here, including Virginia Bio, particularly in the realms of advocacy, reimbursement, regulatory. It's incredibly important to partner with these other organizations who are so critical in the space in bioscience and in medical devices. And so we're doing a lot to really try to grow those partnerships. But as I mentioned to or alluded to earlier, one of the areas where we really need to now find more effective partnerships is with pharmaceutical companies and biotech companies, because ultimately, again, if we're going to commercialize, and develop clinical treatments of focused ultrasound in combination with drug therapies, it's important for us to get the experts in those areas involved with the focused ultrasound experts in terms of deciding which are the most important drugs to go after to pair with focused ultrasound, as well as the companies, the pharma and biotech companies, recognizing that they may have drugs that could be more effective when paired with focused ultrasound. So we really want to focus a lot now on building those partnerships. So if any of you in the audience have any interest in partnering with focused ultrasound companies, we definitely encourage you to contact us. You can contact me, or you can contact Virginia Bio to help put us in touch. And we would definitely like to build some collaborations. So ultimately, in the complicated ecosystem of biomedical innovation, we want to put the Focused Ultrasound Foundation at the nexus of that. So that's why it's so incredibly important for us to build partnerships with all the different players in this space. Because at the end of the day, we think that, without the foundation, focused ultrasound is a great technology for patients. And so ultimately it will become the standard of care for many different clinical applications, and millions of patients will be treated. But all we're trying to do with the investment of our time and our resources is to really move that curve to the left, bringing this to patients more quickly, because ultimately saving time is saving lives. And I'll just show you a short video, again, of a patient who's really been impacted tremendously by focused ultrasound.
When I first heard I had Parkinson's, I was very surprised. I always thought of it being an older person's illness, and I've always seen people in wheelchairs, so I thought I was going to lose all my mobility. So it was very frightening. Walking I couldn't do because of the dystonia with my toes. I couldn't run. I couldn't go hiking. Basically anything that required movement, I couldn't do it. My leg would bounce uncontrollably. It would hyperextend and actually lock backwards. It was very, very painful. I couldn't walk, so I had to be taken in a wheelchair to the hospital. With each treatment, I could feel myself getting stronger and stronger. My symptoms were getting less and less, and my pain was getting less. Then the clinical trial director, she looked at me and she says, "Get up, you can walk." And I thought, I can walk. I can walk. I knew I could. It was amazing. I got there in the wheelchair, unable to walk, and immediately following it, I walked to the room. It was a miracle. The Focused Ultrasound treatment has given me back my life. I've been able to go on walks. I've been able to run. Being able to ride my bike again. It's a miracle.
So Kimberly's story is, as you can tell, I mean, incredibly powerful of how focused ultrasound has really transformed her life. And we have met many other patients who have had similar experiences, which is incredibly gratifying to all of us, of course, and makes us, really drives us to keep doing what we're doing and push this forward even faster. So ultimately, at the end of the day, from the foundation perspective, we're taking generous donations that we receive and using those to create ultrasound solutions that lead to miracles, that can treat disease, and ultimately bring health and happiness to patients. So I thank you for your time, and I think now we definitely have the opportunity for questions. I will stop my sharing now.
Yes, we definitely have some time for questions. So if you have them, feel free to put them in the questions box or the chat box, whichever is easiest for you. And I will make sure those questions get asked. I did have a quick question. So I know you mentioned if people wanted to collaborate, they could get in touch with me or yourself. Is there somebody in specific I should direct them to, or just send them your way?
You can direct them to me, that's fine. Yeah.
Great. And then kind of to your wonderful video, what is the average recovery time after they've gone through a focused ultrasound treatment?
So, patients like Kimberly, I mean, can go home later that day, or sometimes they keep the patients overnight, some of the brain patients overnight, just kind of for an observation, but they can get pretty much back to their, normal activities really quickly. It's definitely a very short recovery time.
Wonderful. And kind of as somebody who has a giant dog child, for the veterinary side of things, is it similar things that are being treated in dogs, or do you guys use, or in cats, do you guys use it differently?
There are definitely a lot of cancer applications that are, I'd say, probably some of the primary applications are in the cancer realm. And, if you have specific interests, I can get you in touch with Kelsey Timby, who leads our veterinary program. But what's great about these cancer studies is obviously not only could focused ultrasound be incredibly helpful for treating these animals, because again, it's non-invasive, it's not going to lead to potential infection and that sort of thing. But we can learn a lot that can translate back to humans as well. So particularly with the cancer, if we're trying to learn about the immune response or drug delivery or that sort of thing, there's a lot we can learn in the animals that we can then translate to the patients too. Human patients. Yeah.
We have a question about just the Parkinson patient video you showed. Is there a way that we could get a link of just that, or?
Sure.
Okay. Because
yeah, we have that on our, should be on our YouTube channel,
okay.
Our Focused Ultrasound Foundation YouTube channel, and also probably on our website. Yeah.
Great. And if you have any issues finding that, please just let me know and I'll get to that. John with Barcode Test says, I am a cancer survivor. Would it be helpful if I shared my contacts with you of the treatment facility and the drug manufacturer that helped me through my recovery?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We definitely want to, do our best to educate other treatment facilities, as well as the pharma about focused ultrasound, and again, maybe identify some ways we can partner. So thank you.
All right, well, I don't see any more questions coming in right now, but you guys all have my contact information. Again, it's Caron Trumbo with Virginia Bio, and I can put you in touch with Jessica if you think of anything later. This has been recorded, so if you would like a copy of it afterwards, please let me know if you want to refresh your memory and see all of the wonderful things that are happening. So without any further ado, Jessica, I want to say thank you so much.
All right.
And we look forward to the next time we get to share all the great things that you guys are doing.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you all for attending. Have a wonderful day.